phenomenal. Okay, start streaming. So, what we have to do today? Today we will continue where we left last week. We have to go in depth into discovering shapes inside 3ds Max. There are several things we can do with shapes, and we need to explore completely different tools in order to be able to make three-dimensional objects starting from 2D shapes. Today I will show you one extra modifier that works with shapes, and you can use it in order to create 3D shapes from 3D objects from 2D shapes. Then I will show you something completely different that is a compound object. It is a tool that combines shapes and leaves them where they are. So it creates new objects starting from drawings. Then I will show you another compound object that instead, is a generical tool that it is useful, and this will be called ProBoolean. And by the end of the lesson, I need also to show you, if we haven't already done, how to use external CAD drawings inside 3ds Max, because we haven't seen this. Is it true? Perfect. So let's start with the first simple thing, that is this. I want to show you a modifier that is called LATHE, L-A-T-H-E, that works in this way. This is a modifier that works only with shapes, like extrude, I would say, but it turns shapes into 3D objects in a completely different way. That is this. Look. Exactly like extrude, first of all, it works when your shapes are closed, when your shapes are not self-intersecting shapes, and it requires, look, whatever shape to be created before, and I will just make a random closed shape, doesn't matter. But the thing is pretty interesting, that is this. LATHE is a modifier that will turn your shape around an axis. Exactly like mirror, in order to use LATHE, we need to understand that our rotation axis will be a certain line that will pass through the pivot point. Why this is important? Simply because if we use LATHE right now, I will do this, it will be slightly wrong, but just to show you. Can you see when I create my shape, can you see that the pivot point is more or less here in the center of the shape? So if I apply LATHE right now without adjusting anything else, I will get this slightly weird result. That is this. Look, select my shape, go to the Modify tab, I open my modifier list, and I will browse till I find LATHE. Okay? What LATHE does is this. I apply it, and poof! This is what happens to my beautiful shape. What LATHE does is, instead of lifting up or down a closed shape, it rotates the shape around an axis. And the axis, as you can see, is a line that is passing through the pivot point. What is Extremely important is that in order to correctly use this modifier, we must understand where we have to place our pivot point before applying it. Because if I move the pivot point now, so after applying lathe, I won't change the pivot point of my shape, so of the drawing, but I will move the pivot point of the result. So I will move the pivot point of this solid object. And this makes no sense at all. So the pivot point must be changed before applying lathe in this way. Look. So I remove lathe. Then I select my shape. I go to the modify tab, to the command panel, and I go to the hierarchy tab. I click affect pivot only, and I will move these so that I will have possibilities that are these. I can choose that my y-axis will be my rotation axis, because this is something that you do into the modifier. I can use x-axis as rotation axis. In this particular case, I could use, but it makes no sense, I could use z-axis as well, but the result would be something that is flat. But at least I have to move the pivot point before applying lathe. And you will see that by doing this simple step before applying the modifier, you will notice that the result will be completely different, and it will be this. So with the same shape selected, just with another position of the pivot point, I apply now lathe. Poof! And this is how modifier creates a 3D shape starting from 3D object, starting from that shape with the axis placed into another position. In the modifier itself, by the way, we can adjust a few interesting things, like, first of all, there is a parameter that is called degrees. Whenever we apply lathe for the first time, we will see that degrees is always starting as 360. And this means that when we apply lathe, the solid that we create makes a full rotation around the axis that we have selected. If we want, we can go more than 360, but we can go less than 360 like this. Okay? This is first simple thing that we can do. Then we can notice another aspect of this solid object, that is, can you see that even if I'm saying that with lathe you make round objects, this object is not that pretty, it's not that round actually. And this is why, because like we have studied first lesson, the cylinder. Do you remember the cylinder can have more or less sides? Lathe, that is a modifier that creates round objects, has a parameter that is called segments, that is exactly same concept. So, if I see that my lathe result is not that smooth, it's not that round, I can increase number of segments, and in this way my solid will be perfectly round. Okay? But at the same way, like we did for the cylinder, If we decrease segments, we will discover that we can make sharp elements starting from lathe. So if I make a very low number, I can even make prism objects using lathe. So remember the same concept that we have made, the homework 1, when we have made the roof of the house starting from a cylinder? This is the exact same concept. So we can make 5, we can make 6, and we will be able to make sharp, solid objects by using a tool that technically is meant to create perfectly round elements. Not only in lathe modifier, there is also another extremely important parameter. That is, if you notice down here, there are 3 buttons that are simply called X, Y, Z. This is why. Because it is true that I have moved the pivot point before applying lathe. But like when we were using mirror, we need to know that through the pivot point there are 3 possible axes that we can use. So according to where we place the pivot, and now we have drawn the shape, we are free to choose that our shape will use Y as a rotation axis. That is what is happening right now to my shape. But if I draw my shape into another orientation, maybe I want to use X axis as a rotation, so I will click it here, X, and the shape will rotate around X axis. Now my shape is flat, so it makes no sense, but just to show you, I can also use Z axis, and the shape will rotate around vertical axis. There is the one that passes again through the pivot point. Why this starts by becoming extremely important? Because, look, let's start by doing shapes and using this tool, but shapes that you can find a little bit more easily in your daily life. See this. You will notice something that when I draw, can you notice the orientation of my plane? Can you see that top is correctly readable? Why this? Because, bless you, if I draw like this, with whatever orientation, now if I draw randomly any shape, and I draw this shape, look, I will try to draw same shape, one like this, with whatever orientation. I would draw same exact thing, but I would draw it by having my viewport oriented so that the top word is correctly visible, and I will draw this shape like this. Boom. Okay, ready for this? Look. If I move the pivot of this shape, I will move it, affect the pivot, I will move the pivot somewhere here. I don't want to be precise right now, it doesn't matter. But you can see that my pivot point and the direction of axis is what is more important. Passing through the pivot point are parallel to X, Y, Z. If I change the pivot of this thing, you will notice that the shape is tilted while the pivot point will still remain oriented by being parallel to X, Y, Z. So if I do the same thing here, I get these two different shapes. Ready for this? Look, I apply, I will just move it a little bit away. I apply lathe to the shape that is wrong first. So I go to the Modify tab. I apply lathe. 360, maybe more segments because I want to make it round. 36. And this is this weird shape that I have with these kind of mountain shape inside. But if I use same drawing, correctly oriented, and then I use lathe, so this is the shape, this is correct, that is correctly oriented, and I apply lathe, I will discover that this shape creates a flower pot. And most of, oops, let's rotate it like this. Okay? And I will tell you that most of the times when lathe looks like it is not working or it is giving you weird result, it's not because lathe doesn't work, it's not because anything else, rather than how you have drawn the shape that you are using to start your 3D model. It is highly recommended to draw the shape by keeping in mind that the grid should be for the orientation of your drawing space. So when I draw my lines that I want to use with lathe, I don't have just to randomly draw them. I should pay attention, make my shapes with a little bit of attention, also because when I draw shapes that are free forms, so when I use line, I have one option that is, if you notice, when I make a line, it looks like I can't control the angle of my segments. This is 90% true, except that if I draw line and I hold shift, okay. Okay, we'll see. So it happens this. While I draw my line, if I hold shift while I'm drawing, I will see that 3ds Max locks horizontal or vertical orientation. But it locks orientations that are parallel to X and Y axis. So if I'm making this orientation here, and I hope, look, that this line and this line will be perpendicular to each other, I mean, this will never happen, because if I am in this random orientation and I hold shift, what 3ds Max does, it will be this, look, poof, it locks this or that orientation. For this reason, when I draw, look, I will draw in a slightly more precise way and see this other shape, because I mean, this would be phenomenal. But look, I draw this, and that. At the very beginning, this is not telling you anything special, but give me 3 seconds, because first of all, we have studied that we can modify shapes after making them, and we have seen tools like fillet, changing vertices to smooth, Bezier, stuff like this. So look what I will do. I will simply select this vertex and I will go till I find fillet. Look, even without any number, because I mean I don't know the scale that I'm using, I just make these like that. Perfect. Same thing here. Fillet here. A little bit of fillet there. A little less. Perfect. And here, why not? Boom. This is starting shape that I want to use. And then I will close my vertex editing. Now see this. In my previous example, when I've made the flower pot, I just moved the pivot somewhere. No? Now I don't want to move the pivot somewhere. I want to move the pivot in a very precise position. And both, when we have seen how to use mirror, or you remember, I showed you the example of making a door from a box, no? So when we want to move the pivot, but we want to snap it on a corner, even now we can do this. And I want that my pivot will have its y-axis perfectly matching this line here. Okay? So I will do this. I will move the pivot, but instead of just randomly moving it, I will go to snap. I will right click to snap, and I will choose that I don't need midpoint. I need vertex and pivot as snapping points. Why this? Simply because now I will move the pivot from its pivot position, so that will be my starting point, to this precise vertex. Okay? Now I will turn off affect the pivot, and can you see that now, only because when I have drawn, I was holding shift and that line is perfectly vertical, you can also see that y-axis is also perfectly matching that side of the shape. Ready for this? Because this would be too much. But let's see this. I select the shape that is lovely drawn, and it has the pivot point perfectly placed. I apply lathe, and boom! In a second, I have made one extremely famous piece of design that is called the tulip table. Have you ever seen this? I know. I mean, if not, I won't do that. But also notice why I have placed the pivot point not just randomly along that line, but I wanted to place it on the bottom of that line, simply because that pivot point manages, as well as lathe, any other transformation that I do to my table. So the fact that it is into the bottom allows me also to select angle snap, select rotate, and I can see that right now my table is horizontal, no? Like it fell down. No? But if I have the pivot point on its bottom, if I rotate it 90 degrees, this is now perfectly on my top plane. I have not to move it up, down, somewhere, but this is on the ground of my project. Okay? I know you want to ask me, something, but you're not brave enough to ask me, that is, why there are these horrible things happening here. Is it true? I know it. The thing is, believe it or not, these weird looking wrinkles are appearing only because we are too precise, and only because we were snapping the pivot on the vertex. So 3ds Max has that the middle axis, basically it is like slightly crumpled, you know, like you have a piece of paper and you do this. But there is something that we can do to solve immediately this problem. There is this. Into lathe modifier, we have seen these parameters. Look, we have seen degrees. We have seen segments. We have seen axes. I mean, this would be wrong, but we can change the axis even now. And from this table, I can make this weird looking wheel. Okay? Y was correct. But there is one more extremely important parameter that you need to know. That is, only, take care, it has to be used only when you really snap pivot to existing axes. All in that case, you need to enable the option that is called weld core. Because, believe it or not, by simply checking this option, see what happens to those wrinkles. You see this? No, leave it here. Look, I click this one. Ready? Steady? Go. Boom! No. Fantastic, isn't it? I mean, weld core means that that axis that for 3ds Max was rotating on itself, in reality that axis disappears, and instead of having a lot of tiny triangular faces on the top and on the bottom of this table, these triangular faces are basically welded into one top face that is flat also. Okay? Is that clear? Perfect. Why this is important? Because, again, these will be something that a lot of times you will have as a problem to solve. Because in general, when we make round objects, in general, we will do them by keeping our shape and our pivot point location extremely precise. So these kind of wrinkles will appear a lot of times. But at the first look, it will be something that, I mean, makes no sense, but especially when we will start talking about rendering, having those wrinkles into the rendering will be extremely visible. So our objects will look really wrong. And if we have like a texture, or if we have like reflections on the material in those triangular weird faces, reflections will look wrong, textures will look wrong. So knowing this tiny option is something crucial to make your object correctly looking. And last thing about lathe is this. How can we technically understand which starting shape we must draw in order to use lathe? I mean, how can we connect the shape to our round object? Thing is particularly simple, and the process will be this. Look, let's see if I can quickly find a shape, let's say, look, wow, no, I mean, oh, that's perfect. Let's see this one. Okay, let's imagine this. This is clearly a round object, no? So, first of all, it is round, and it should start turning a light in your 3ds Max skills and say, okay, this is round, I should use lathe. But what I have to draw? You need to think this simple process to understand what to draw. That is this. And we will also make a beautiful experiment. That is, I will draw these directly here. I mean, that's to try. That is this. First of all, we need to understand where is in our object the symmetry axis. We can see that bottle has this as vertical symmetry axis. So what we have to do is we need to think, what happens if I make a section of my bottle by using a plane that is passing through that vertical axis? If I make a section of the bottle, believe it or not, I will get a shape that is this. More or less. When I use lathe, what I have to draw is I have to draw only half of my section. So I have not to draw the entire section, but I have just to choose if I want to draw left half of right half of this section. So I will draw just, let's say, this one. Okay? And I need to remember one extremely important aspect of lathe. That is, like extrude, lathe works with closed shapes. What it means? It means that when I go back into 3ds Max, I can't draw a line that is just this. And then I right click. Why this? Because if this is an open shape, if I use lathe right now, what happens is that my object won't be a solid object, but like when we were extruding open shapes and we get those surfaces with no thickness, this will happen as well as here. So look, if by mistake I do this, I move the pivot, I will try to be precise, but I do on purpose to make it look even more wrong. So if I apply lathe now, it looks like maybe it works, maybe, but I will notice that if I make less than 360 degrees, I will notice that this piece of glass has no thickness. Okay? And again, why this is important? Because the effect of a wine bottle depends on the fact that glass that is used to make the bottle has a certain thickness. Then inside the bottle of wine is empty, but then there is another piece of glass that is behind that has again another thickness. So if I want to simulate a realistic bottle of wine, I have, instead of making just these weird looking and open shape, I have to do this. Look, and it looks complex while it is not, also because you had to do something very similar for the homework that was meant to be for today. That is, I draw just one side of my bottle. That is true. But what I will do is, before using lathe, I go to spline, I select my spline, and by using a tool that we have seen last week and that you have used for the 2-day homework for leather part of the chair, I use outline and I give thickness to my shape by making a parallel version of the shape. So now, by using outline, you can see that this is technically and correctly a closed shape. Okay? So now I can move the pivot. I will use the snap. I will snap the pivot here. And now I can use lathe. Only now. Poof! And I mean, this is a broken bottle of wine because it is not a 360. Let's make it vertical. Look at that. Can you see that now? You correctly see glass thickness into the bottle. Even if I close lathe, so I make 360 and poof, these will be correct. The day that we will explain materials, light passing through materials and so on, we will discover that this will look like a real bottle of wine, while if we keep the drawing without thickness, it will look like our object is just transparent and we will be able to see through like silk material rather than glass. Tell me.
What if we use thickness instead of outline? What if we just use thickness on the spline instead of outline?
You want to try? Are you ready? Look. No, you said this. You correct me if I'm wrong. I draw these. Is it true? Then you say, what if I use rendering, and what if I use this before applying lathe? Am I right? You know what happens? Nothing. It happens that rendering in enabling render, enabling viewport, and being able to see thickness is something that remains in your shape till it is a shape. The moment, look, and I will try to follow all steps. No, I move the pivot here, but see what happens. The moment that I apply any modifier to my shape, the shape will turn off thickness immediately. So even look, I will open these so that you can see inside. Can you see that this has no thickness at all? Because thickness look, will appear again when I will remove the modifier. Poof! And now I have thickness. But this is not only for lathe. If I have a shape, look, and it has visible thickness. If I apply extrude, it happens the same. So whenever you apply a modifier, poof, thickness is gone, and that parameter that was true till my shape was just a shape instead is override by the modifier that I am applying after making my spline. Okay? So no, it doesn't work at all, but just by adding thickness. Okay?
A quick one. How do I move this? I don't know what I clicked.
No, it doesn't matter. This is something that happens sometimes. That is, you mean those?
Yeah, because I clicked something. I don't know.
No, it is nothing. Because sometimes when you edit vertices, sometimes it simply may happen that in your line you will see those white corners that are the bounding box. But sometimes they appear, sometimes they don't. So it is not really important.
Okay, another question.
I'm ready.
For example, if I want to draw one line that is 1 meter.
Yes.
Can I type 1 meter?
No. I'm so sorry.
There is no way to know that is that.
Technically, yes, but you must be ready for this.
I am.
I don't know. Look. Because this will take forever. That is this. I make this, first of all, let's see if I'm using centimeters as units. Okay, you want to draw a line that is 1 meter, so you have to do this. You make your line first. Let's say, let's turn off thickness cause doesn't matter. Then you must do these very simple steps that are. You select the vertex. This is your starting vertex. Perfect. And you have to see which is its coordinate. So this is 6.256. Lovely. This is 196. So it means that this line right now is 190 centimeters long. So you will do this. Select these. You copy this number. Very easy. Select these. You paste that, but you add 100. Press enter. After 3 hours, you have made a line that is 1 meter long. I mean, don't challenge me, because you know what? It is possible, but it is extremely annoying. This is why instead, and maybe this question, it is not prepared, believe it or not, but can be the hook to show you how can we use external files inside 3ds Max. Because 3ds Max is extremely versatile. I mean, you can make a 3D object, you can move things into the space here and there, but it is everything rather than precise. Also because technically I have explained how to make a vertical line that is 1 meter long. But luckily your classmate wasn't asking how to make a 45 degrees angled line that is also 1 meter long. You know, this is impossible. I mean, you should use the calculator find the x, the y, multiply the square root of 2. I mean, it would take forever. But I hope that you know any other CAD software in general. Not, I mean, the example that I will show you now is how to use in particular AutoCAD with 3ds Max, but not because the thing that I'm showing you will work with AutoCAD only. It works no matter which software you use that is a vector software. So you can use, even Adobe Illustrator is a vector software. And because these softwares that have vector technology inside, they can export to DWG or DXF as a output, then for 3ds Max they will be read the exact same way. So I'm just using AutoCAD because I have it and because it is pretty common, but then you can use whatever other CAD. For example, in another class, a student asked me if she can use Rhino 2D at the same way. And the answer is yes, exactly the same. It has to be a vector software. So, see this. In a vector software instead, it takes 3 seconds to draw lines and to type values. Okay? So, look here. For example, I will make just these 45. So now I can make these 45. And I know that in this CAD software, because I can snap easily elements, I can be extremely precise. So look what I will do. First of all, when you use a CAD like this, you need to know that you are a little bit more free to type values and to manage them as units that you want. For example, when I use AutoCAD, but this is my personal way to use it, and I know that it's actually wrong, I like to type centimeters. So I type 100, and for me they will be 100 centimeters. I type, but technically it's wrong because AutoCAD works really well if you use millimeters. And this is also the way that I used to teach AutoCAD because it is more correct. But then there are people who use meters. So if I want to make a line that is 1 meter long, a lot of people just type 1. And then if they want to make centimeters, they will type 0 point numbers and so on and so on. So, which units you want me to type? I'm millimeters. Perfect. So I will type 1000. Boom. And then I just zoom out. This is a line that is perfectly 1000 millimeters long. This is perfectly 45 degrees angled. Okay? So in a CAD, I can be super precise, but then check this. I save my file. I call it whatever. And I save it. I just need to pay attention to one thing only, that is, I am using 3ds Max 2019, okay? So, look here. When I save my file in this option, it is clearly written, and let me use, sorry, because I love it. Can you read here? Not now, but it's okay. So let's do like this. That's better. This is saving my file as AutoCAD 2018. So it is a release that is older than my 3ds Max. So 3ds Max will have no problems in reading these files. because newer softwares can always read older file versions. If I was using AutoCAD 2020, it may happen that AutoCAD 2020 saves files as DWG 2020. So if I use 3ds Max 2019, 2019 won't open 2020. So if I have a newer software, I should at least check that in here I select an older file format. In general, to avoid these kind of problems, it is simply highly recommended to keep softwares from the same brand with the same release. So you have Autodesk softwares, Revit, 3ds Max, AutoCAD, Inventor, whatever else. If you have one that is 2019, keep them all 2019. You upgrade one to 2020, update them all to 2020. Also because as students, you can have them all for free. No? So you choose to update one, you have to update them all and delete all the releases. In this way, you have never those problems like you will read like not able to read this or unrecognized file formats or stuff like that. But see this. So I saved my file and I forgot to click save. I said whatever into the desktop. So now this makes no sense, but I will show you at least a few things. Look, this is a line, and can you see where my line is starting? The distance from the center in AutoCAD. Okay? Pay attention there. I go to 3ds Max, and let me delete this wrong line. But now see this. I simply go to File, Import, and then I go to Import. And I will look for that file that I've saved before that was in my desktop. It is this one. Okay. It is 2018, so I click Open. But when I import a DWG or DXF into 3ds Max, before viewing immediately the shape appearing in my viewport, I will see this dialog box. In here, there are, I would say 3, maybe then we will see 4, but there are 3/4 options that you can't miss because they are extremely important. First and most important option is this one, the one that is called model scale. In here, you must check the option called rescale. And this is why. Because you need to tell your 3ds Max which units you were using in AutoCAD. Okay? So you must do this. You must check the option called rescale. And only when this option has been checked, you will notice that incoming file units becomes available. Incoming file units means choose from here, from this menu, the units you were typing in AutoCAD. And it doesn't matter if I was using millimeters in AutoCAD, but I'm using centimeters in 3ds Max. It doesn't matter at all, because by telling these millimeters, 3ds Max will correctly translate the length of all my AutoCAD shapes. So what in AutoCAD was 1,000 millimeters, because I'm using centimeters in 3ds Max, will become 100 centimeters, so it will be correctly scaled. Second extremely important parameter that you must click in this dialog box before clicking OK is the option called Derive AutoCAD Primitives By. This must be always selected as color. Always like this. And let me highlight it. That is so nice. This must be color. I mean, you don't have to say like, but maybe. No. Use this one, and this will give you a lot of beautiful results that we will see in a second. We have almost done, but additional two options are options that we will check in a second when our AutoCAD drawing will be slightly more complex. Okay? Give me a second. So first of all, now that at least I have these two options selected, I can click OK. Ready for this? Boom. And now I can also turn off this. And now I have my beautiful 1 meter 45 degrees angled line perfectly imported into my 3ds Max. Tell me.
If I have other objects already drawn on the Max and then I import, would they be erased?
No.
Or will they be together?
No, they will be together. So you can combine previously made files by adding shapes now. No, they won't be. You are not making like a new scene with this file. This not. When you import drawings. That question appears, but not today. The day when I will show you that you can also import pre-made 3D files, like a block, a chair, tables. In that case, there is a question that appears that says, do you want to erase all other objects, or you want to merge this one with previously existing files? So, but not when you do drawings. When you do drawings, they are always added to the scene. Okay? And let me show you this. Ready? Steady? Go. When I import a drawing in 3ds Max, that drawing is basically, look, an editable spline. So whatever I import can be also modified in 3ds Max. So I can use weld, I can use fillet, I can make my vertexes smooth, Bezier. I mean, because once that the shape goes inside 3ds Max, it simply becomes an editable spline. Okay? But let me show you even more than one interesting thing. There are these. What if in my AutoCAD drawing I have more shapes? So what if I have this thing? And I will do something particularly interesting, that is, these shapes, even if they are drawn by using snap in AutoCAD, you may notice that I have drawn them by using line. Okay? See this instead. I draw this shape. We'll just make it slightly different, and then I right-click, close. This instead is a shape that I have drawn by using polyline. Okay? So see now, I save these. I go to 3ds Max. I delete this previous line because it will also match the one that I had before. And I do the same thing. So I go to import, import, select the file, click open. Take care, rescale won't remain the option that you have set before. So it has to be checked each time that you import a drawing. So I have to click again, millimeters. Color remains, but it remains for this session. So if I turn off my computer, I turn it on in an hour, again, I have to set even the option that is color. But I click OK and see what happens now. In AutoCAD, both shapes were sharing same color, okay? So what 3ds Max does is it attaches together shapes that have same color. So now, even if in AutoCAD there were multiple shapes, now in 3ds Max they are one editable spline. This is not a limit, but this is an option that you can use in order to make your life easy. What it means. If you know that this happens, you may start using in AutoCAD just different colors for different objects. So you can make all of your walls white, all of your windows yellow, all of your doors green, all of your furniture pink. And in this way, if I have walls, in 3ds Max, walls will look like one shape. Windows, they will be like one object. And my life will be a lot easier. And this is first. But second thing that I want to show you is that, you remember this shape here in AutoCAD was a polyline. This was made by line. Okay? We'll see the difference. Look. If I apply extrude, this is what happens. The polyline that has in AutoCAD vertices that are welded together, the polyline has vertices welded in 3ds Max as well. Lines that in AutoCAD are like this. Look, I can do this in AutoCAD, no? And I can see that they were just continuously drawn, but they are not connected to each other. They are not connected in 3ds Max as well. Tell me.
What if I group all of those
No.
lines?
Group doesn't work. You have to do two completely different things. One if you use 3ds Max, one if you use AutoCAD. But group for sure is the only option that you should never use. I mean, never, no. Forget group in AutoCAD in general. But they are not connected here, they are not connected there. Option one, you are super good in AutoCAD. I mean, you hit bread and AutoCAD each morning. So one thing you should do instead is you select your lines, and instead of group, you type join. Join, enter. As you may see, it says 7 objects converted to one polyline. What join does is it really combines vertices together, and it turns your continuously drawn lines into closed polylines. So not group, but if you are any familiar with AutoCAD, you should use join. Okay? If I save these and I import it, believe it or not, this will work. But another thing that you can do instead is this. Look. So I won't save it. Exactly. Let's say I say no. Another thing that you can do instead is this. You can go to File, Import, select the drawing. Again, take care, units must be set. But then you can see that in this dialog box there is a tiny option that is called Weld Nearby Vertices. Okay? So let me also, this option here. This option by default is always turned off. So what it does, it basically keeps AutoCAD drawings as they are once that they are imported into 3ds Max. But if you instead check this one, all those vertices that, at least as it is written here, they are 0.2 centimeters far from each other. So even if in AutoCAD you have made a tiny mistake and you have lines that are just crossing each other a little bit, or there is a gap of a few millimeters, in this way 3ds Max will connect automatically all those vertices together. So in this way, by clicking OK and by clicking that option, you will fix your AutoCAD drawing without using any AutoCAD tool. And if I try to extrude it now, you will see that both shapes will be extruded as solid objects. Okay? Why this? Simply because join is an option that is available in AutoCAD. But as I said, importing DXF or DWG is something that is not importing from AutoCAD. It is importing vector drawings. So maybe Illustrator won't allow you to weld vertices. Or if you have these because maybe in AutoCAD you were not that precise. If you have this kind of tiny mistakes in AutoCAD, if you use join between these two lines, as you can read, 0 objects have been joined because join in AutoCAD requires extreme precision first. But instead, look, if you zoom out, can you see that instead my drawing looks perfect from here? But this kind of tiny mistake, instead by using weld nearby vertices in 3ds Max, will be immediately fixed. Okay? See another thing, and this will be last option in working between vector drawings and 3ds Max. That is this. In multiple softwares, you can work both with colors or with layers. What it means? It means that right now in my AutoCAD drawing, I have one layer that is called 0. Okay? But I can make a circle, and I have two choices right now. There are, I can change the color, but I can keep the object on the same layer. But another thing that I can do is I can add more layers. And why this? If I add another layer, let's say I make it red and I make it current, say this, and I draw these circles, okay, and this is now, But see this. If I save my drawing now, what I have will be this. In 3ds Max, I already have these shapes that I already have imported, extruded, so they are part of my 3ds Max project. But in my AutoCAD, I have made a few changes. I have added these red circles, okay? And I need them even in my 3ds Max file. But if I just go to import, boom, 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 at the end I will have twice these kind of zigzag shaped elements. So see, last interesting option that you can use when you use the XF DWG file import in 3ds Max. Look, don't move my table. See this. You go to File, you go to Import, you go to Import, select the file, wait, go to millimeters, colors, weld, but now you have to go to the second tab that is called Layers. In here, you can simply check the option, click, that is called Select from List, this one, and see these. My previous shapes were made on the layer that was called 0. By default, 3ds Max will import all of your layers. But if you go to the Layer tab, you check the option Select from List, then next to the name of each layer, you can find a slightly visible black check sign. That means you are going to import that layer. But if you don't need it, because I don't need my 0 layer, I just want those extra red circles that were made into the layer 1, I will uncheck the layer that is called 0. I will click OK, hoping that everything else is fine. Yes, yes, yes. Boom! And I will import only those circles. Also, they were sharing same colors. So if I select one, I will notice that they are attached together as one unique shape. And for example, if I extrude or lathe or whatever else, they will be another object. Okay? Perfect.
And to unattach, we go to ungroup?
No, it's detach. If for whatever reason I want one of these circles with another extrusion height, another color, another material, so it has to be independent, and maybe I was just making a mistake in AutoCAD, because in AutoCAD I should draw it with another color and I forgot. It's not the end of the world. I can select that spline that for me must become independent, and with the spline selected I scroll down, down, down this menu till I find detach. Boom! And now, even if this was starting as an AutoCAD drawing, when it is in 3ds Max, this is an editable spline. So I can use whatever I have learned about editable spline, detach. I can attach them instead later on. I can do whatever I need, but now this is completely independent. I can move it, delete it. For example, look, if I use lathe with a circle and I move the pivot point outside the circle, you know what I obtain? I obtain what is in geometry is called a torus. This torus, aka donut. Okay, this is a circle with lathe, but in this way I was able to make a circle, and if I wasn't, but in AutoCAD I could perfectly type the radius, place it, snap it. In AutoCAD it could be extremely precise, so I don't need in this way to be precise in 3ds Max, because I can use an additional tool to basically fix that gap that is extreme precision in 3ds Max. Okay, that can be achieved, but it will destroy your AutoCAD experience, because it is extremely annoying to be precise in this software. Okay? See? Yes? Perfect! So, let me show you last thing for today. That will be slightly complex, but extremely interesting. That is, I want to show you one additional way to create three-dimensional objects starting from shapes. This will be also first time that we will use not a modifier, but a new, completely different tool that is called a compound object. So, first of all, a compound object is a tool that works only if we previously create elements in our file. Compound object that I want to show you now is called loft. And loft works in this way. Look. First, you need to previously create two shapes, not one. There must be two independent shapes, where one must be closed. So this is mandatory. Which one we can, let's make an ellipse that we have never used. Why not? So one of these shapes must be closed, and you will see this in a second. Second shape can be, instead, as you please. It can be closed, it can be open, it doesn't matter. So I will just make a line like this. What loft does? Loft is a compound object that will create a new three-dimensional element in my project by basically making this simple operation. That is, it will use this closed shape as a section, as a profile, and it will use this other as a path to follow. So technically loft will extrude my closed shape along the one that I use as a path. Extrude modifier, if you have noticed, works by using one direction only. Loft by using one axis only. Loft instead gives you a little bit more freedom, and if you make a zigzag or a smooth path, you can have your section following precisely that path. How it works is not that hard. It requires a little bit of experiment, but it works like this. You must create these two as two different shapes. then loft is a button that you can find in two ways. There are these. Look. Or you go to create geometry. And can you see down here where you see standard primitives? I open here and I find compound objects. If I have only my path shape selected, you will see that loft is a button that I can click. Can you find it? Yes, the answer was yes. Again, create geometry. Then you open the menu where in general you find standard primitives written, but you open this menu and you go to compound objects. But see this, if you have no selected shape, or if you select both shapes at the same time, you will notice that in these two wrong situations, loft can't be clicked, okay? In order to have loft as a button, as a function that you can enable, believe it or not, you must have only one shape selected, and not just one random shape selected, but to work properly with loft, you must select the shape that for you is your path. Okay? You select the path, loft, as you can see, becomes available. Okay? Ready for this? Yes, thanks for the feedback. And then check this out. You click loft. There are 32 billion buttons, doesn't matter. Click the tiny one that is called Get Shape. Get Shape becomes blue, and after clicking Get Shape, you select the second shape that you have previously drawn, the one that must be closed, okay? And see what happens. Poof! This is what loft does. It extrudes my closest shape along the path that I have created. Okay? And when you have done these, just right-click to stop the creation process of your loft. Tell me.
Okay, so we drew it like that.
Yes.
Okay, why is it like that?
One by one. Because, first of all, mine is the same. Look.
Yeah, why?
1 second. See this. Ready? Steady? Go. First of all, if I select my loft object and I move it, I can see that the compound object called loft is not like a modifier, is not changing my original shapes, but it has created a new object that has the line and the ellipse inside. Why this is important? First of all, because the loft still depends on this path and this ellipse. What happens if, like your classmate says, look, Can you see that my ellipse was pointing up on the y, but then my loft goes up along the z? No? See this? If I want, I can still select the ellipse, go to the Modify tab, okay? And I can, if I need, change parameters of the ellipse. And if I change parameters of my original ellipse, I will change the way that my loft object looks like. Can you see? Yes, Marco, we can. Thanks, I'll give answer by myself. You see now? And as well as changing parameters in what I have called shape, so the one that is the section extruded, I can select the path. Path is an editable spline, so how many tools you know inside the editable spline? You can move vertices, add vertices, weld, fillet, smooth. You can do whatever you want. Look, whatever you do in your original path will also change how the loft works. So if I keep this as a corner, my loft will have a corner. For example, if I right click and I make my path with a smooth vertex, my loft will become smooth. Okay? If I move this point up, the loft will go up. This is the reason why this is called not a modifier, but this is a compound object. So it means that it takes the path, it takes the shapes, it combines them together, and it creates a new 3D object by using this and that as starting information. In general, at this stage, there is someone who asks, what happens if I delete those shapes? What happens is simply that if you delete the path or the shape or both, you are not going to lose the loft. The only aspect that you really lose is that now you have no simple ways to modify again this loft as you were able before. I mean, so it's not that you are deleting the loft, but you can't easily adjust it. So, in general, when you make a lot of loft objects, and you will see that your file will have a lot of shapes here and there, the only thing that I personally suggest to do is not to delete original shapes, but from here, from the Scene Explorer, can you see the eye symbol next to all of your objects? So instead of deleting them, just hide them. This one. So you have your loft and your scene is not confusing. You have not that many elements inside your scene, but whenever you need, you can show your object, select it, and whenever you need, you can adjust the shape or adjust the path, and you can easily modify your loft object. Okay? Till here? More or less. Perfect. Let's say more rather than less. hopefully. Let's see one tiny, but slightly complex thing inside loft, and then you will understand why I'm explaining all these things, and when I will show you your unbelievable next homework. That would be no more than fantastic. It would be a revelation. See, see this. Let's say I make something slightly more complex. Like these. Perfect. And then another, I don't know, an arc. Perfect. So again, to use loft, select the path, go to create, compound, loft, get shape, and select your section. Okay, that is beautiful. I don't know what it is, but it looks great.
Roman, the Roman secret.
Why not? Maybe it should be a little bit more round, so it should be like these. Leave it like that, it's okay. What I want to show you is this. Can you see that from the beginning till the end of my path, this section keeps same exact dimension? Inside loft, technically, I can do a lot of complex adjustments, a lot, but at least I need to show you one thing, that is, if you select your loft, you go to the Modify tab, and you scroll the menu of your loft down, can you see that inside your loft object there is a tiny menu that is called Deformations? And if you can't see it, let me highlight it. This one. Oops. This. Okay. See what you have to do. If you open Deformation, there are multiple things you can read. There is Scale, Twist, Teeter, Bevel, Fit. We will use one deformation only, and one would be more than enough to start understanding how loft works. And I will show you only first one, the one that is called Scale. Okay? See why. First of all, you have to turn the lamp next to Scale so that it will become active, and then you click Scale button itself. When you click Scale, there will be this weird menu appearing. Okay? And let me move it here on the side. Let me stretch it. What you can see here? Can you see a red line here? You can also notice, let me tell you, that in here there is a black vertex. In here there's another black vertex. If you see in the vertical axis, there is a number that goes from 0 to 100. But if you notice, even here in the horizontal axis, there is a number that goes from 0 to 100. What they mean is this. Vertical axis is scaling amount. So what these vertex and horizontal axis is when the path starts is 0%, when the path ends is 100%. So right now, this black vertex here and this black vertex there are telling me that at the beginning of the path, my section is 100% scaled. So it has same dimension, that is exactly how I draw it. At the end of the path, this section has again same scaling amount. So the scaling is constant through the entire path. Into the scale menu, I can do immediately this particular adjustment. That is, can you see this button here inside scale, move? So look, if I click move and I select the vertex at the end of my path and I move it, let's say down, okay, you know, can you see that right? If I do this scaling, so the vertical value will be basically 0. Want to see what happens in my loft when I release the left button? It happens this. It happens that at the beginning of my path, the shape is 100% its scaling factor, and the more we go till the end of the path, the smaller the shape becomes, because its scaling factor is constantly decreasing. Okay? But if we want, we can imagine that the scaling factor here is like an editable spline. So it is a shape. Why we need to think about that? Because if we want next to move, can you see this button here, the one that looks like a sparkle? This is create points. So if we click this button, we can add more vertices along our scaling function. So instead of having only the scaling at the beginning and the scaling at the end, we are free to say, look, from 0 till, I don't know, a certain point, I can move these so that the scaling will remain 100. Boom. This remains constant here. But then maybe scaling factor, and I move it down, drops. Then it is increased. Then it goes down. Then it goes up. And then it goes up again. And it is continuous. Okay? So we can control the amount of scaling, and believe it or not, do you remember that inside editable spline we can right click on our vertices and we can make them Bezier? No? Can you see that my scaling function looks like a sharp shape? If I want, even inside scale, I can select my vertices, I can right click, and I can make them Bezier, or smooth, or corner. Bezier smooth means that the curve goes in both sides of the vertex as a continuous curve. But if I want, I can also make a Bezier corner even here, so that now I can choose how the tangent will be on this side and how the tangent will be on that side. And whatever I do in my scale function will be immediately visible in my loft 3D object. Okay? See? Yes? No? But now let me show you a couple of examples before, leaving your homework just at the end, so that you will just remain like breathless. See this. Example 1. Example 1, if you know the example 1, but have you ever seen this kind of elements in motorcycles, like when you have motorcycles, have you ever seen these kind of elements here, like this one? Exhaust pipes. No? Look. To make something that looks so complex in 3ds Max, believe it or not, you need one circle, one line. What you will do is you will give your line, I closed it, it's okay, but you will give your line the path that that kind of exhaust pipe is following. So I will start by making these vertices smooth, and I don't know, then I will move these two vertices up. I can see that at the end there is something that is slightly straight, and then suddenly becomes curvy, so I can refine these, and I will show you while I'm refining. So I will put a vertex very close to the end, another one close here, another one there. Then I select these and that, and I will make it, I don't know, corner, because that part must be straight. I will select these two and I will make them smooth again, and I will move these down, these like this. I'm super happy about the result. Okay, yeah, come on, more or less. So I select my path, I go to create, geometry, compound, click loft, and I get the shape, and I get this circle. And at the beginning will look everything except the thing that I want. Okay? But see this. When I go to my modify tab and I select the loft and I turn on and then I click scale, I can notice, now that we have understand what this shape is about, I want to show you one more element that you can see in this function, in this dialog box here. That is, can you see these green dashed lines? And if you notice, can you see at the very end, these three dashed lines are very close to each other? You know in reality what they are? In reality, they are vertices that we have drawn in our shape. So instead of guessing where the scale should be increased or should decrease, I can use those as guides. And I will make something like this. I will add scaling points here, for example, and I will start by moving these scaling point. So I will move this down so that it starts very thin. I will move these 2 points up so that here the pipe becomes thicker, and if I need, I can go more, I can go up, oops, select both, like these, okay. If I don't like these, oops, sorry, if I don't like this sharp edge in here, it is just because this is a corner, but I can select, right click, make it Bezier corner maybe, and I can add a small curve in there, or if I want super smooth, I can make it Bezier smooth, and this will be like a perfect curve. Then I can also zoom in, and I can move with a bit more precision in here, so that I can move this point here, this point there. But I need a few more points, so I will add another point here, another point there, and I will move this like that, these like this, and I start by creating that cylindrical element at the end of my exhaust. So I will move this down. Then I will move also this down, because the very end is very, very thin. So I will move these down here, and this as well. Okay? I mean, it's not a masterpiece right now, but it gives you the idea that you can make this very complex looking shape just by working with scale and loft. Okay, this is, I mean, I don't want to explain anything else, but wow, it's phenomenal. Also remember that this depends on the path. So if for whatever reason I need, I can still move these vertices of the path, and they will affect my loft. So this complex object instead becomes extremely easy to be modified, adjusted, and I can easily fit the right position of this pipe, or then I can change this vertex position. Okay, this is how loft works, and then be prepared, because if you go to the server or the Google Drive and you do homework 5 that is empty, that's perfect. Why? Wait a second. Wait a second. First of all, so if you want to see your homework, the homework is homework 5. You can find it on the server as well as on the Google Drive server, and it is not a tutorial, but is simply how to do this. No, I mean, takes a couple of seconds. This is not a tutorial, but at least, because I'm not that bad, you can find that there are additional pictures that will show you a few hints of which tool you should use to make certain shapes. Okay? Fantastic, isn't it? Okay? Next week, we will start by reviewing your issues, and then I will continue. I will show you more interesting things. For now,